Hi there, I'm Astro and welcome back to one more episode of Soul Art. Today I'll be exploring the subject of remote viewing and I'll be interviewing Laurie Williams. Laurie Williams is a well-known trainer in remote viewing as well as the author of two books on the matter. One is called Boundless and the other one is Monitoring. She's also the founder and president of intuitivespecialist.com. I hope you enjoyed this interview as much as I did, so let's dive into it. All right, Laurie Williams, once again, really nice to meet you. We're going to start this conversation by, well, if you don't mind, talking about what is specifically CRV, Control Remote Viewing. I'm very aware of the subject, but the viewers are not very much. So if you could do that for us and elaborate, it would be really great.
Sure. Controlled remote viewing is a written process that allows you to separate mere imagination from true psychic perceptions. And it was developed for the US military, for the intelligence part of the US military, when they discovered that the Russians were getting a lot of our military secrets. And this man defected from Russia, having documents indicating that Russia had a psychic spying program. So when they discovered this, they went to Stanford Research Institute, which is a big think tank in Palo Alto, California. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of an arm of the US military, a top secret place. And they had these physicists who had assisted in developing the laser. So these were intelligent men. And they said, we have to do something to combat this. We have to do something to compete. So they began doing research into telepathy and clairvoyance and all these things. And they ended up with more concrete proof that clairvoyance and telepathy and ESP exist than that the FDA in the United States, the Federal Drug Administration, the Food and Drug Administration, has to prove that aspirin is effective as a pain reliever. So they actually have more proof that ESP exists than that we have proving that aspirin is effective as a pain reliever. And so it just grew from there. And they ended up hiring a man named Swan to develop this actual written set of protocols. And it has to do with the right and left sides of the brain, studying brain science, and also the interaction between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. So it's really fascinating when you think about it, that our brains are almost like some kind of transmitting and receiving mechanism hooked up to the great big cosmic database in the sky, if you want to call it that. And this big cosmic database in the sky has all the information that ever was or ever will be in all of time and space. So all we have to do is plug into it, and then we can access information, get answers to questions for improving our lives, improving our finances, our careers, our relationships, helping the police find missing people, helping archaeologists find artifacts that have been buried for thousands of years. So it's been really an exciting journey for me.
You just mentioned the archaeologists helping archaeologists to find artifacts and some bits and bobs of history. Do you think they use it already? No, actually, for sure they used it to figure out the big mystery of Atlantis and the big mysteries of civilization in the past. Do they do
that? Yes, but those are considered to be esoteric targets in the sense that, let's say that I do a remote viewing session and I tell you all about the history of Atlantis. Well, unless I have a really solid track record in the database showing my strengths and weaknesses as a remote viewer.
All right.
And you might not be able to put a lot of credence in what I tell you, because I could tell you that I just had a conversation with the extraterrestrials on the planet Zircon in the galaxy of nebulae. And you might say, that's fascinating, but is it true? Or am I just full of self-delusion? And the reason that I'm a big stickler on this is because I really believe that in my school, for example, we always want to train our students on provable targets with immediate hard feedback that you can look at and say, okay, this is what I said, and this is what the truth is. How did I do? What did I get right? What did I get wrong? Like we might have a viewer who is 90% accuracy, has a has a track record of 90% accuracy with colors, let's say, really good at being able to pick up on the colors at a target that they can't see. It's hidden from them in an envelope, and they're really good at it. And then if you have that same viewer after hundreds of sessions has a 90% accuracy rate in colors, then you could task that viewer with what is the color of the planet Nebules in the galaxy of Zircon. And if that viewer says, oh, the planet is purple, well, then you can put 90% of your faith in that answer, because that viewer does have a 90% accuracy rate in colors. So that's important. Uh-oh, I can't hear you anymore.
Now you can. I was muted. Some remote viewers, some viewers, they do have fortes, right? They do have the expertise. Like one is more strong in defining colors or numbers or textures or landscapes. So it's like that.
Yes, and generally we break it into categories like some viewers are excellent at viewing people. Other viewers absolutely cannot view people to save their lives, but they're really, really good at viewing man-made objects or locations or activities or events, So we have all these different categories that viewers can really excel in. And then if you have a viewer that has a weakness in a certain area, then you can work with that viewer in practice to help that viewer learn to make that weak area a strong area. For example, I used to have a terrible fear of heights, and anytime a target involved heights, I just couldn't view it. I kept being given height targets to view, and eventually I got very good at height targets. They became a strength of mine. And it also bled into my personal life, because I also was able to go on the highest roller coasters in the world and do bungee jumping and all parasailing and all these things afterwards, because I became desensitized to that fear of heights. So it cured me of my fear of heights, essentially.
And you also mentioned Ingo Swan. I know that he's a very famous remote viewer, but can you explain why specifically he is so well regarded as the biggest piece, the biggest pillar in terms of history of remote viewing? Is that because he was an artist, or he was just the first one who actually made a protocol? What is it like?
Yes, the thing is that when they first approached Stanford, the guys they approached were Dr. Harold Putoff, and Dr. Russell Targ. These were the two physicists, right? So these two guys were doing a lot of experiments. I think Hal was in charge of the program. But eventually when they thought, well, if we're doing this for the US military, there needs to be some uniformity to it, some that we can teach it to anybody in the, pull a guy off the front lines and teach him how to access his intuition. So they needed some uniformity, and they hired Ingo because they had actually had Ingo as a participant, like a volunteer in one of their experiments, in their research experiments. And he was so outstanding in his psychic ability. Plus he was an amazing genius. So they said, what if you helped us in putting together some sort of a protocol, or some kind of a methodology that could be easily taught and made into a uniform practice. So that's what Ingo was hired to do, was to create the actual written protocol. So instead of having to go into a trance, or anything like that to get information, we actually can take anyone, anywhere, with any kind of ability, and sit them down with paper and pen and help them follow this set of protocols, and they can truly access really interesting information. Italo, it's really funny. There was a woman who contacted me. She was a producer for the Travel Channel. And she said, I'm doing a show right now for the Travel Channel called Secrets of, and the episode I'm working on right now is called Secrets of the White House. And I just interviewed President Jimmy Carter. And I asked him, what was the most amazing thing that in your presidency? And he said, oh, it was when the remote viewers found the downed missing Russian plane. And and so she's like, what's remote viewing, and then she ended up taking my course because she was so fascinated by his answer. And it was during a time when this plane went down. It had all this technology on it that the United States wanted to get their hands on, and no one knew where the plane had gone down. So they asked the remote viewers to tell them, and they gave them GPS coordinates and everything. And the funny thing was, their first reaction when they got the GPS coordinates was, no way, the plane could not be there, and then something else happened the very next day that caused them to have to go to those very GPS coordinates, and they went, and there was the plane right where the remote viewer said it would be. And we had a team of 14 viewers with 4 project managers working on an archaeological thing where this archaeologist had been looking in a 200 square mile area of ocean for 40 years of his life, seeking artifacts that he believed were there, and he had not been able to find them. And we had 14 viewers. We were able to give him GPS coordinates. He took a boat and divers and equipment out there and found everything we said he would find right at those GPS coordinates.
And when it comes to GPS coordinates, a person needs to learn how to read the GPS coordinates when they receive it. Let's say, for example, person XYZ go to the school and start to learn, look, I need you to find this GPS, follow this GPS protocols here, these coordinates. And how is the person actually knows how to read it? How does it work?
Well, it usually, the only time GPS coordinates are required would be when the person who needs information, whom we refer to as the tasker, when that person asks for GPS coordinates, it's because they have either a GPS that they can punch in the coordinates and it'll take them right there, or they already have really good experience when reading GPS coordinates. So we, generally speaking, only supply GPS coordinates when it's required of us. So the archaeologists ask for them. The police, oftentimes when we're working on a missing person case, will ask for GPS coordinates.
And the way that you learned how to do a remote view was through Lynn Buchanan, if I'm correct, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. Yes, when I had been doing missionary work in Latin America for many years, and in Ecuador and in Chile. And
have you passed through my hometown in the Amazon?
No, I didn't make it to my hometown. I didn't get to go to Brazil. My husband at the time got to go to Brazil. He went to Rio de Janeiro, but I didn't get to go because I was about to give birth, and so I couldn't go with him. He went to go attend a conference in Rio, and I had to miss it because I was always pregnant back in those days. I just get pregnant all the time. But when I was down in Latin America, when I came back, I really kind of wanted to explore my own abilities, because my whole life I had had unusual occurrences. I would have precognitive dreams that would come true. I would have moments of precognition during the day that would come true. I would sometimes see spirits or have, physical objects moving around me. And so I always wondered, where did that come from? What is that? What can I do with that? And I wanted to explore it and understand how it related to my spiritual belief system as well at the time. And I happened to go to a conference. I was working as the director of a refugee resettlement program in Texas. And they sent me to a conference in Colorado, Denver, Colorado, that had to do with post-traumatic stress disorder in refugees. And I was attending the conference, and that night, the night after the first day of the conference, I dreamt about a man who had been presenting at the conference. I didn't know this man. He was a stranger, but he was a recently retired colonel in the US military. And I had actually just a few days earlier, in my first few days on the job, I had just met my very first colonel ever in the US military. So I thought, wow, that's strange. Suddenly I meet 2 colonels in 1 week, and I'd never met a colonel in my life, So I in the dream, I was just explaining to this colonel that I knew this other colonel that I had just met. And we were just talking about this other colonel. So I get to the conference. I wake up, I go to get dressed. I go to the conference the next day. I get there early, and I'm waiting to be let into the ballroom. And the man is standing there with me, standing next to me, the man that I dreamt about. So I said, I had a dream about you last night. And I'm a total stranger, and my mother always used to joke, if you want a man to remember you, tell him you had a dream about him, So,
She was right.
And so he says, really? What did you dream? And I said, oh, I dreamt that I was asking you about this colonel that I just met in Amarillo, Texas. And he says, really? Well, what branch of the military was this colonel in? And I said, I don't know, but I think he was in military intelligence. And
Mm.
he goes, oh, that's interesting because I was in military intelligence. And right as he said that, in my mind's eye, I saw the cover of a book that was turquoise and black. And I had just seen this book on the new arrival shelf at the bookstore. I didn't buy it or anything. I had just seen it. And suddenly,
Mhm.
as it flashed in my mind, I said, have you seen that new book? And he says, what new book? And I said, I don't remember the name of it, but it's turquoise and black, and it has something to do with psychics in the military.
Mm.
And he said, are you asking me about Psychic Warrior by David Morehouse? And I said, yes, that's the book. He said, I can't believe you're asking me about that book because I'm a main character in that book. He said, I was the psychologist in charge of that program for 20 years.
Mm.
And then he got very interested all of a sudden, and he
Of
starts
course.
leaning in, and he's like, ooh, are you artistic? Do you remember numbers easily? Do you remember maps easily? He's asking me all these questions, and I'm kind of backing away like, yikes, men in black are coming after me. And so he saw that I was getting a little nervous. So he said, hey, when you get home, go on the internet. And the internet was really new back then.
Yeah.
But he
Mhm.
says, go on the internet and look up. First, he told me to look up Targ and Puthoff, which is the names of Harold Puthoff and Russell Targ. I knew I would never remember that. I said, I'm not going to remember that. And he goes, okay, just look up controlled remote viewing. Look up controlled remote viewing. So I get home a few days later, and I look up controlled remote viewing, and up comes Lynn Buchanan's website. And it says, what is CRV? And then it had this wonderful explanation. And the explanation really resonated with me because I'd been wondering, like, what are all these weird things that have happened my whole life? Why do they happen to me? And as I read this, he basically explained that all humans have this ability, and it's really no different than your eyesight or your hearing or anything else. It's just a normal sense that God gave everybody, and the only problem is that our current culture tends to poo-poo that, suppress it, say that it's silly or it's evil or whatever, but that it's really not. It's just a part of being human. And when I read that, I felt this sense of freedom, and I decided that I would do the thing you weren't supposed to do on the internet in those days. I would write to someone I didn't know. So I sent him an email to Lynn Buchanan, really scared. And I was like, do you think I might be able to learn this? And he wrote back this very gracious response. And this was back in 1996. This was back in 1996. So he writes this very gracious response. And it just so happened that the very next week I had to fly to Maryland and be in Maryland for about a week. And that's where he lived. And so he only lived 40 miles from where my hotel was. And I ended up having to stay over the weekend, and I was kind of stuck. I didn't know anybody. And so he invited me to come meet him and his wife. And they ended up becoming dear friends. It's kind of a funny story because I stayed there for 5 hours talking with them. And when I left, his wife looked at him and said, Lynn, you have to stop inviting these crazy people to our house. And and I didn't find that out till many years later. We became set, they were like second parents to me. But I found this out many years later when someone at a dinner that we were all attending said, Lynn, how did you and Lori meet? And he tells this story, and it's all everything I remember up until the point that I left. And
Ah.
then and she turns to me and says, you have to stop inviting these crazy people to our house. And I was like, why did you think I was crazy? And he said, we thought you were like 25 years old and you were talking about your grandchildren. And we thought, this poor woman's nuts. She thinks she has grandchildren. And she says she has 7 children and a grandbaby. Poor girl and her imaginary family. But I was actually almost 40. And I just looked young for my age at that time. So I was almost 40, and I did have 7 children and a grandbaby. So I really wasn't making it up, and I wasn't as crazy as they thought. I was like, so when did you decide I wasn't crazy? And they were like, oh, the jury's still out on that one. But they were like, no, when we eventually got to meet all the children and the grandbaby, then we knew,
So
so
you ended
anyway,
up having that amount of kids in the end, or
I
no?
have, yes, I have 7 children and
My goodness.
two stepchildren, and I have 21 grandchildren and a great grandbaby now. We have a little great granddaughter who is about 8 months old now.
Well, but
So
you do look very young. I'm surprised. 7 kids. Yeah.
thank you. I appreciate
And talking about kids, somewhere I read that the child until 7 years old has a higher connection with the psychic abilities, and when it starts to go from 8, 9, 10, starts to lose because a lot of things are going on, the society imposing and the family, the way they raise. Is it true that is it true that until 7 years old, the child is more likely to manifest this psychic abilities?
Well, what we do know is that the younger the child, the more the subconscious is in control. And as we age, as we grow up, the conscious mind begins to take dominance. The part of you that you say, hey, this is me, this is Italo, I am Italo. That part of you is your conscious mind. But when you're a baby, you don't really have that sense of self, and your subconscious is right there, and you're still very connected with wherever you were before you were born. You're still very connected to that part of yourself.
You're not even aware of your body, right? It's all
Yeah,
ages.
exactly. So children are very in tune. And the fun thing too is, how they say the bumblebee can't fly because it's aerodynamically, it should be impossible that the bumblebee can fly. But yet the bumblebee doesn't know that. So the bumblebee flies.
Just like
It's the same thing with children. This little object right here is called a radiometer.
right.
And a radiometer, if you shine a light on it, see how it's turning, how the little flags turn?
Yeah.
And you hold it up to the light, and it's painted white. The flags are painted white on one side. I'm sorry, I meant to hold it up. Flags are painted white on one side and black on the other. And so when one of my kids was a little boy, I would have him sit in the semi-darkness where the flags couldn't move, because no lights on it. And I would ask him to move it with his mind. I said, make those spin with your mind. And so he would just look at it, and they would start spinning. And then I'd say, can you make it go the other direction now? And he would look at it, and he would make it change directions, because children don't know they can't do it, or that it's impossible. So they just do it. And we found that kids are so their abilities. Thank you so much, sweetie. I'm super thirsty. Thanks, babe.
You have to keep hydrated. And I have two very interesting episodes regarding children. One with myself when I was 7 years old. I remember very clearly the movie called with Burt Reynolds is it's one that he drove a Trans Am. Very
Yes,
old.
Bandit.
Smoking the Bandit.
Smoking and the Bandit.
Smoking the Bandit, yeah. When I was 7 years old, I watched that movie. It was already old when I was 7. That movie was already old. So, and then I really fell in love with that car. So, like, really, really resonated with me. That car was like heaven to me just by watching that car. My neighbor has a little toy with that Trans Am, but it was totally fake one, like a black market one. It wasn't even black, it was fluorescent green, and the ego in the front was black, wasn't even gold. But I really wanted that, and I asked him, please, can I have it for one day? I promise I'll give it back to you. He said no. He keeps playing in front of me and make me jealous. And then I really wanted that. That was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. By 7 p.m., my father came from work, and he brought a original piece of Trans Am on that day, original miniature, the one that comes with glasses and open doors and everything. And the ink was gold, and the car was all black. I was mesmerized, not only because I had the car, the toy, but I also what I just manifest in that.
Yeah.
Like that is sticking in my mind forever. And the other story that was was too. The other story was with remote viewing. After I been watching some of your interviews and Lynn Buchanan as well, with Jeffrey Michelov, right? And then been watching quite a lot of you guys. And then I tried an experiment with one of my kids. He's 7 now, and then I grabbed this magnet, and I asked him, holding this, Skylar, do you know what is in my hand? Don't need to tell me what it is, just describe it. And then he goes, is silver, is hard, and it smells like vinegar. And it's the well, wow, man! I was so impressed. So that's my question of the kids until 7 years old and how they are so connected with the subconscious, as you say.
Yes, and gosh, I all of a sudden I can't think of her name, but there's a woman who just focuses on. She has like a school where she just trains children in psychic abilities, and they are so gifted. And as long as you can help them, like you said, don't tell me what it is, just describe it to me. And that is our mantra in CRV. You know, describe, don't identify, because we use the left brain, which is the non-psychic conscious part of our brain, to name things, and that has kept us alive as a
Mm.
species. When Oog and Og are walking through the medieval forest, and one of them turns around and says, "What's that?" and the other one is already running, saying,
Yeah.
"Saber-toothed tiger." You know, that one is the one that we descended from because the other one got eaten. So the ability to name things is very, very important. But at the same time, with CRV, we're trying to heighten the abilities of the right brain and tap into the right brain, which is the part of our brains that describe things. And so if I had something in an envelope and I said, Italo, can you describe what I have in this envelope? And you said, well, it's something red, smooth, and shiny. I think it's an apple. Then we pull it out and it's a fire engine. You were really great with the red, smooth, and shiny. It's when you tried to name it, I think it's an apple, that things went off, right?
Oh, I see.
So you really learn when you're doing CRV not to depend on labels, that labels are,
Cool.
you know.
Okay, and back to Ingo Swan. He was able to project his mind into outside of the planet, isn't it? Like Mars, Moon, even Saturn and Jupiter, isn't it? He was able to do that. Is it common among the community or no?
Yes, you know, I have been tasked with the dark side of the moon. Over 20 years, I got tasked
Ah,
like three.
please tell me what is in that place.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that the people who asked me to do this, and each time I was totally blind, I had no idea what the target was. If I was given any information, it was the target is a location, describe the target. That was the only information I was given. And 3 times spread out over many, many years apart, it was the dark side of the moon. And each time I found the same thing. I would I would start remote viewing and I would find myself in this very barren, kind of grayish brown, you know, place that was very colorless and just really barren, no trees, no vegetation, and very dark. And then I would come upon mining operations. Every single time I found mining operations on the moon, on the
Mm.
dark side of the moon, where, you know, what something was being mined, and there were beings there that were not human, you know, that were definitely extraterrestrial, very large beings, and they were mining something, some kind of material on the
Any
moon.
structures like pillars, buildings, any?
Not on the moon. I did find structures on Mars, though. Definitely found structures on Mars. And the cool thing about controlled remote viewing is that you can move through time, and it acts like a time machine. So you can literally visit other periods in time. And I've been tasked with Mars on several occasions. And on Mars, especially if you go back in time, like a few million years on Mars, it seemed that Mars was inhabited, and there were buildings that were structures that looked like big obelisks, kind of like the Washington Monument. If your listeners are familiar with
Mhm.
Washington D.C., if you Google the Washington Monument, you'll see a
Yeah.
big obelisks outside of the Capitol building in Washington D.C. But it was, you know, I would see these obelisks in a circle, and the obelisks had the ability to transmit and receive information. At the top of them, it was some kind of a transmitter. And so it was really fascinating to me to experience that. When I was asked to, and I actually wrote all about this on my website there. If your listeners go to the website, which is intuitivespecialists.com, with an S at the end of
I'll
specialist,
put in the
intuitive.
description.
And that that website, not only does it have a free 4-part class, it's completely free and teaches you how the basics of
Oh,
CRV,
great.
but it also has the website also has a blog section where I've written a lot of blogs. I mean, there's probably 100 blogs there, but one of the blogs, it's called 18 Years of Excitement, because at the time I wrote it, I'd been doing this for 18 years. Now it's been 25 years. So I wrote that blog 7 years ago, but I talk very specifically about seeing Mars and what was on Mars. And it was quite a life-changing experience for me to view Mars. I found it to be really, really amazing experience, because when I remote viewed Mars and found these obelisks, my monitor, because a lot of times if we are remote viewing and we have the benefit of having someone there with us to just
Okay.
say things like, so my monitor said to me when I was already describing the obelisks and saying that they were transmitting and receiving information, the monitor said, could you move to that which is transmitting to the obelisks and describe? So then I suddenly was in a totally different location, and I was experiencing these beings that seemed to be interdimensional in some form or
Okay.
fashion. They didn't seem to have a tangible body like we do, and they were transmitting love and concern for the planet, and were definite. And the interesting thing that, and I tell the story in the blog, but the interesting thing is that when I was remote viewing this and I reported my findings, because this was actually a paid project, when I reported my findings, I was then put in touch with Mel Riley. And Mel Riley was the very first remote viewer in the military unit.
Hmm.
And and when I got in touch with him, he said, tell me everything that happened while you were in your session. And as I was telling him, he was finishing my sentences. He had been a viewer on the same project and had had the exact same experience that I had. He saw the obelisks, he went to what was transmitting to the obelisk, and he experienced these interdimensional beings that had the same message, that gave him the same message that they gave me, which was that they were quite concerned about the planet and what we were doing on this planet to the ecology and things of the planet.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that because on the previous episode, I interviewed the philosopher Jason Razor-Giuliani, and he was giving me very interesting insight about Mars as well. He mentioned that some few remote viewers, I think in 19, I'm not quite sure it was 1974 or 84, in the 70s or 80s, I'm not quite sure, but that was conducted by Swan, I believe, and they found a huge pillars and huge structures, colossal things in Mars back in, I don't know, 200 million years ago, something like that. And not only the structures were big, but people were big as well, because somehow that atmosphere allowed them to grow in a more bigger structure. And yeah.
And that's Ingo has a book called Penetration. There's a book called Penetration, and the latest version of that book, after Ingo died, they found a section that was originally written to go into the book Penetration. Penetration is mostly about the moon.
Mm.
But and so when it published the first time, it was all about the moon. But then after he died, they found a section that he had written that was all about Mars. And then they were like, wow, okay, we need to republish Penetration and include it. So it now has a section about Mars as well.
Cool. And uh, back to specifically just remote viewing now. What is the difference between remote viewing and astral projection?
Okay, so first of all, you have to know that the term remote viewing is like the term martial arts. If I say, Italo, I have a black belt in martial arts, your first question would be, what kind of martial art, right?
Mhm.
Because martial arts is too generic of a
Yeah.
term. It could be taekwondo or karate or jujitsu. So it's the same thing with the term remote viewing. Remote viewing is a basket in which people throw everything: tarot reading, runes, crystal balls, you name it.
Right.
It all falls under the category of remote viewing. And so a lot of times if people find out I teach remote viewing, they, oh yeah, I've been a remote viewer my whole life, And so remote viewing is really a misnomer. I teach controlled remote viewing, extended remote viewing, and associative remote viewing. Those are 3 different types of remote viewing. And the difference between controlled remote viewing, in fact, the difference between controlled remote viewing and astral projection is the same for all of the types of remote viewing. in that you never leave your body. With astral projection, a part of you truly is leaving your body. And that part of you actually has weight, because it's like the ghost part of you that departs your body when you die. They've actually had dying people on special beds that were had really fine weight ability to measure weight. And when the person expires, the scale actually drops a tiny bit.
Oh,
They
okay.
actually lose a tiny bit of weight. And that means that ethereal part of ourselves, that etheric body, has some substance to it. And there have been many documented cases in which someone having an out-of-body experience or astral projecting is actually photographed or seen in another location. And that means if you were using astral projection or out-of-body to technically remote view on, let's say you were going to spy on the enemy, whatever that means, and you were using astral projection, you could be detected. You could be seen by the guard dogs. You could be picked up on the cameras and photographed. And so
That's what they call bilocation.
Bilocation, exactly. And so that wouldn't be very handy if you were supposed to be undetected. It's not if the goal would be to view something without being detected. Whereas with CRV, especially, what we're doing is we're connecting our subconscious minds, plugging it in to that all-knowing part of ourselves. And it's almost like you're bouncing a radio wave off the atmosphere. We call CRV an interview and report methodology, because it's like the conscious mind is interviewing the subconscious. The subconscious reaches up, grabs some information, pulls it down through the body, gives it to the conscious mind, and for the conscious mind to document. And so the body is the link to the whole thing.
So there is a field of information all around us.
Exactly.
Basically, that we tune in.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Is it easier for people who are more artistic to become a successful remote viewer, or not necessarily?
Not necessarily, no. I don't think so. Because the thing is, there's so many factors that make up anyone's personality, right? You might be artistic, with paints, for example, and you might also have Asperger's and have a difficult time communicating, or, what I mean? There's so many different combinations of personality types that there's no way you can make a generic sentence or a generic statement that says, for example, all left-handed people are going to be more psychic than right-handed people. Or all people who are artistic are going to be, are going to learn this easier than people who are not artistic. There's just no way. It really depends on the person and how often they practice and that sort of thing.
So everybody can learn. Everybody has abilities like that.
That's exactly right.
But some people are more talented than others, right? Naturally gifted than others, or no?
Some people are more naturally gifted, but that doesn't necessarily make them a better remote viewer.
All right. Okay.
And I'll tell you why. Because a natural psychic, for example, many natural psychics really get excited about naming something. Like, for example, let's say that we were working on a murder case and the psychic said, "Oh my gosh, he killed her with a knife." Well, the police already knew that. They didn't need a psychic to tell them that. They already knew that. And so, but a lot of times what happens is once a psychic names something, they often feel like, hey, I did my job, right? I feel good. I describe what happened really accurately. But a lot of times the information that's needed is very nebulous, and they need a description, not a name. They really, they need a very clear description of something. Sorry, my nose is itchy. Anyway, and so when that happens, we found that, like, there are some natural psychics who become excellent remote viewers, but it's because they practice. They practice and they follow the protocols. Whereas there's other natural psychics who don't want to have to be held down by a structure, so to speak, and they would not make a good remote viewer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. Yeah, some artists, they actually are able to channel some sort of information, isn't it? There is this artist called Austin Osman Spare. I don't know if you ever heard of him. Basically, he closed his eyes and started to paint, and sometimes he shut off the lights and paint, and then see the painting result painting in the morning. So he said that he got in touch with, I know, who knows, spirits, the field, whoever we want to call it. So I think it's in the same spectrum, perhaps. I know it's all subconscious, isn't it? In the end of the day, it's all subconscious mind, isn't it? We have
Yeah.
that psychologist Carl Jung as well, right? That he used to have a lot of insights in that. I remember a case that he was describing in a book that he felt a sharp pain on the back of his head, and on the next day he found out that one of his patients committed suicide by uh, using a gun to shut them. So this kind of thing, we all connected somehow, isn't it? It's in the field, is there somehow.
Definitely is. It definitely is. And I was working on a missing person case once, and I suddenly felt a really hot, sharp pain that started here and it came out here. It
Oh
just
wow!
and I realized I had just been shot in the head. And it was I leapt out of my chair because it was so strong while I was doing the remote viewing session. And and when those kinds of things happen, it's so important to detox, to just do a very good detox.
And what are you
And
suggesting for detox?
the way I personally like to detox, it's interesting because Lynn Buchanan describes a way of detoxing where you take whatever's happening at the target and you really separate it from your own life, kind of like unzipping a zipper. You want to separate whatever's happening at the target versus what's happening in my life. But I found that that sometimes when I would in that incident I just mentioned where I felt like I got shot in the head, I found that trying to do it the way that Lynn had suggested was actually drawing me back into the target and making it more difficult for me to detox because I was getting sucked back into that same target again. So I found that what I have to do after viewing is I have to immerse myself in my own reality in whatever way is best. Like, for example, I find that one of the best ways for me to detox is a full body massage. There's something about a full body massage. It's like pushing a reset button, where you just start fresh again. And also sound therapy, whether you're dancing or singing or listening to music. So like I have all kinds of instruments here. I don't know if you
Oh
can
wow,
see.
it's indigenous instruments, is it?
Yes, a lot of indigenous instruments. And then behind that big drum, there's there is a, there's guitars and there's a kind of a xylophone like thing.
Mm.
And so we have a lot of instruments that you can use for sound detoxing. More about the sound itself, like how the sound resonates with you, like a chime that goes bing
Oh.
and it vibrates. It's like it helps to bring up the frequency of the body as well. So I find that if I can do something, I love to go. We have a whole collection too of like Native American flutes, for example. Flute
Oh, wow.
playing is really it's a beautiful way to detox because the frequency of the sound is so beautiful.
Good.
This one's a hard one, sorry. It's just really, it's just a
Native
beautiful.
American.
Yes, Native American. We have a huge collection of flutes that we play. And if you find, Lind also uses flutes for detoxing. It's just certain flutes have a certain frequency. And
As you say, sound has a very powerful effect on us, isn't it? When we listen to a music, as you say, right? People used to play Mozart, Beethoven, right? Or even if you go to a heavy metal concert, it causes some sort of impact on your body, isn't it?
it's
So,
so true. Some remote viewers even get messages through music. I had one remote viewer, and I had chosen a target for her, and it was this gorgeous Brazilian woman, as a matter of fact. And she was beautiful, and she had dark skin and beautiful headdress on, and a really sparkly outfit. And it was nighttime, and she was dancing, and it was Carnival. And so that was the target. And so the woman is completely blind. The student is completely blind to the target, has no idea what it is. And she's starting to describe what she's getting. And then she goes, I keep hearing Santana's Black Magic Woman. And she said, and so she wrote down Black Magic Woman, in quotation marks, because she kept hearing the song by Santana. Then she says a few minutes later, she goes, now I'm hearing that song, Dancing in the Moonlight. Well, what was her target? It was a black magic woman dancing in the moonlight.
Mm,
And so,
right.
yeah. And so it's really funny. I had a target in South America once that I was working on, and I had no idea what the target was. I wasn't given any information. And I kept hearing, Don't Cry for Me, Argentina in my head, So, so sometimes you can
Out of
even
the
get
blue.
out of the blue. Sometimes you just get information through music.
Yeah, that sometimes it happens to me when I'm listening to some. Well, I'm very eclectic. I listen to all kind of music. And another day I was listening to a folk heavy metal from Germany, and immediately when they start to play, it goes. My mind goes to I don't know, ballrooms in the forest. Like people dancing together. That kind of Robin Hood vibes or Game of Thrones thing. Immediately, I not even see any images, just the sound.
Yeah, music is wonderful. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
that's great. Laurie, I could have been talking to you for ages here. We hit almost an hour already. I want just to end it up and wrap this conversation. Maybe you could talk a little bit about intuitive specialists.
Yes. Well, first of all, Italo, I have a book that I think would help your listeners if they want to just check it out and kind of get a little bit of a taste of what it's like. They can not only find this free class, completely free on my website. It's a 4-part class. I think in total, it's 8 hours of free instruction. One of the things I hate is I hate when I sign up for something like a free webinar and it's nothing but a big sales pitch. That really irritates me because I feel like the one thing we can't get back is time.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't like people to steal my time. So when I created this, excuse me, my whole motivation was just to offer something where people could try. They could try CRV and find out if it works for them. It's just a toe dip into CRV, just the surface of it, but it gives them number one, they can see my style of teaching, if they like it or not like it. They also can get an opportunity to find out, just do an actual session. So they get to do a session. And so there's
I'm gonna
that. And
enjoy myself.
yes, it's a great class. I've get so many letters going, that was amazing. That was an amazing class. I can't believe it was free. So there's that. And then there's also my book, Boundless, your how-to guide to practical remote viewing. And my author name is Lori Lambert Williams, and you can find it on Amazon.com. We're getting ready to publish it in Spanish and in French, and hopefully very soon in Portuguese. We're also getting ready to launch into Latin America. So I'm very excited about that, and to the Spanish speaking world. And so there's just intuitive specialists. The goal of my company is to provide the most holistic training in remote viewing, where people can get CRV, ERV, ARV, where they can go from beginner to advanced to post-advanced to professional world-class remote viewer, all in one place, in the school. We also have classes in video courses, also in live 3-day workshops. We also have a club that you can join and be part of to get regular mentoring where, you meet with me once a month.
That's
And I put
helpful.
at whatever level you're at. We also even have a private forum that is not Facebook based, just for our students to mingle in the various levels that they have. So we have 5 different levels of remote viewers that can meet with people that are at their same level and meet like-minded people, have a wonderful supportive community. Everyone treats everyone really kindly and very supportive. And we do fun projects. We do serious projects. We did a project to see who would be in the White House after the last election. It was before they had even chosen the Democratic candidates. So we were like, okay, so I blind tasked a group of advanced remote viewers with who would be in the White House by March 21st of 2020. And they all described Kamala Harris, which is interesting. Everyone described Kamala Harris, and they didn't know what they were viewing. All they were told was the target is a location on a specific date and time. Describe the most important person at that location. That's what they were told.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So
So it
there
was
you
really,
have it.
yeah. So it was very, very fun. And there's so many things, so many interesting things you can do with this. We need to change the world, Italo. We need to raise consciousness on this planet. That's my mission.
We do. When the Native American tribes pray for the sun to have some rain, they do get the rain, right? They do get
Yeah,
the rain. So
that's so.
that's something that they knew already.
Yes, it's
Oh, one more thing I forgot to ask you. Uh, Psychedelics, like ayahuasca and LSD, stuff like that. The visions that people have in those experiences, are they linked to uh, powers of perception of the future or past, or not really? It's another thing. It's just a personal journey, an individual journey.
It seems to me that it's an individual journey. I believe that plants do have, every plant has a mission as well of how it can serve, the world, not just humanity, but how it can serve on this planet. Like we all have a purpose here, so do plants. And I believe that there are some plants whose job it is to help reveal you to yourself and help you heal old wounds and old traumas and help you overcome things that are holding you back from being the most you can be. At the same time, many plants, if people think of it just as like a recreational drug, for example, it doesn't have the same impact as when it's done in a very sacred ceremony with great reverence and respect,
Yeah.
with an intention in mind. That's very important as well. What is the intention here?
Yeah, you have to dive in this kind of experience with an intention in mind, isn't it?
Yes.
That's true.
And I think one of the most important intentions we can possibly have is self-love. Because right now, I think the world is hurting, and it's because people really hate themselves. And when you're full of hatred towards yourself, then you treat others unkindly and you lash out. And so one of the things of our company model, or our company mission is love. It's just love. I believe that love is the strongest force that exists, and it's the only constant among all dimensions and all universes. So that's our message: love.
From eons of time, love is always there, isn't it? Love
Love
is
is
the
one
force.
constant. It's the one thing that's always constant.
That's a nice way to end the conversation, by the way. Love is the key. Love is the
Yeah.
key. Once again, Laurie, my big pleasure to have you here. It was a dream come true to me to talk to you. So it's
Oh,
very
thank you so
nice.
much. Oh, it was great, Italo. Thank you so much.
Hey guys, if you enjoyed this interview and want to help me bring more of this content to you, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and why not, leave your comments. It would be much appreciated. Thank you, bye for now, and be healthy.